I've been using the Canon RF 2 to 800 millimeter lens ever since it came out all the way back at the end of 2003. And at this point, I've had well over a year of experience using the lens on my Canon R5 and now my Canon R5 Mark II. If you're thinking about buying the lens, I'm going to share with you all the things that I love about it, as well as some of the negatives. Throughout the video, I'm going to share a ton of images that I've made with this lens, as well as the settings. So the first thing, it's an extremely sharp lens. I've been really happy with the sharpness of it. And even whenever I pixel peep and zoom way in and look at all of the details, I've been really impressed with how sharp the lens actually is. Now, there's a couple of factors that go into making sure that your images are sharp whenever you're shooting at such long focal lengths. I would say probably the most important thing, and this would go for really any lens, but especially at this long focal length, is making sure that your shutter speed is fast enough. If you're trying to hand hold this lens at 800 millimeters at a slow shutter speed, chances are it's not going to produce a tack sharp image. You need to make sure that you're really following what you would consider to be the standard protocol of shutter speed for the subject and distance that you're shooting at. I've found the autofocus on this lens to be super fast and snappy with the two cameras that I've mainly used it with, the Canon R5 and the Canon R5 Mark II. I was shooting hummingbirds with this lens. I was really curious, how would it react to a small subject that is moving very quickly? And the experience was so much fun. I had a blast shooting hummingbirds at 800 millimeters from a relatively far distance for the size of the subject. And I was able to produce images that kept that subject in focus, even though at times it was in a busy environment with flowers and everything else that it was moving in and out around. And you can see some of these images. I was shooting at super high shutter speeds, sometimes 1/8,000th of a second. I did have to boost my ISO to be that high of a shutter speed, but it latched onto those hummingbirds and didn't let go until it exited the frame. So it was a really pleasing experience to use this lens to be able to get that close to the subject and even be able to shoot at those high shutter speeds whenever I was that close. And that's the thing about 800 millimeters. You can be close to your subjects in the frame without being close to your subjects physically. You're able to maintain a little bit of a further distance, which makes whatever you're shooting a lot more comfortable. So you're able to get more natural reactions. If I would have been closer to where these hummingbirds were at, they probably wouldn't have come in. But because I was able to stay a little bit further back, I was able to not disrupt their behavior at all and still get close shots. Now, prior to getting this lens, I did have the RF 800. That's the lens that's fixed at f11, and it's a fixed focal length. You can't zoom in or out. And I did find with that lens that there was some chromatic aberration going on. You would pixel peep, you'd crop in, and you would see some fringing around the edges. With this Canon RF 2 to 800, I am not seeing that to the degree that I saw with the RF 800. In fact, I really don't see much at all. Maybe sometimes depending on lighting scenarios and detail and things like that, but really it hasn't been something that has stood out to me whatsoever, and it should be a non-factor if you're considering purchasing this lens. Now, my go-to lens is my Canon RF 100 to 500. And typically my setup looks like I'll have that 1 to 5 on the Canon R5 Mark II, and I'll have the 2 to 8 attached to my R5 Mark I. The RF 1 to 5 gives you 5 stops of image stabilization. One upgrade that I really appreciate with this longer lens is it gives you 5.5 stops of image stabilization. Now, I'm going to be honest, I really don't know what that really amounts to whenever you do the math and things like that. I'm not a math guy. I get lost in the weeds when it comes to some of those details. And if you want to describe what this actually means down below, whenever you're comparing the focal lengths of the stops of image stabilization, be my guest. I'd appreciate it. And I'm sure other people might appreciate it as well. But I really do like that this longer lens has a little bit more image stabilization built into it, because at that longer focal length, you're definitely going to run into a bit more shake. So I appreciate that Canon made that upgrade in this lens. Now that said, I shoot handheld with this lens all the time, and I would tell you that I really don't have the steadiest hands, but whenever I'm out photographing, a lot of times I'm mobile. I'm moving around quite a bit, and I really have not had any issues with stabilization whenever it comes to photographing with this lens. Recently, I've been doing a lot of bald eagle photography, and for me, that's almost 100% handheld. Sometimes I'll have a little bit of stabilization if I'm in my vehicle. I can rest it on a lens bag or something like that. But for the most part, I'm out in the field, outside of my vehicle, photographing these eagles in flight. And I didn't have any issues with stabilization as far as shake that would occur. As long as my shutter speed was at a reasonable amount, I was able to capture sharp images with this lens handheld. Speaking of moving about, I've noticed that I really don't see any lens creep in this lens. The 1:5, 100%, I get lens creep all the time. I'll put it onto my cotton carrier. I'll lock down the ring to make it a little bit tighter. And still, after a while, I'll look down and the lens has crept all the way out to the maximum focal length. With this lens, I have not noticed that. It seems to be just a little bit tighter in there, and I don't get the lens moving and extending out whenever I don't want it to. Speaking of build quality, which I kind of was there, build quality on this lens is absolutely fantastic. The RF 800 felt plasticky. It felt cheap. This lens feels like an L lens without being an L lens. Yes, it is heavy, and I will say that maybe that heaviness actually helps in keeping it steady. You might get a little bit more tired using it, but if the lens is really light and you're hand holding, you're shooting at 800 millimeters, I think that having a lighter lens, it's going to be harder to keep steady. By having a heavier lens, it's a little bit easier, I think, to maybe hold it steady. The incredible range of 200 to 800 is absolutely fantastic, especially if you're trying to tell a story. You're trying to create a portfolio. You know, you're able to stay in one spot and get close shots of whatever your subject is, but also without even moving from that spot, zoom out to 200 and have more of a landscape, have more of an environmental shot where you're able to tell that complete story of the subject. It also, at 200 to 800, makes it easier to find birds in flight in your viewfinder. You can be zoomed out a bit and then zoom in once you find the subject at that further distance. Then zoom in, now you're closer and you're following the subject in the frame. I've heard complaints about the tripod collar not being removable. To be honest, I don't mind that. I really like it that it is fixed. I have had tripod collars become loose before, and that's not a good thing. I'm always double checking and locking that down. With this, you don't have to worry about that. It will rotate so that you can set up for a portrait shot. However, it's not going to come off. It's fixed right on the lens, and I find that to be a really good feature to keep it safe. Especially sometimes I'm walking, not using a strap, and I can hold on to that tripod collar with confidence, knowing that it's not going to hit the ground. The last positive that I'll mention is the incredible value that this lens provides at 200 to 800 millimeters to have that focal range for under $2,000. If you're a beginning wildlife photographer, absolutely go after this lens. You're trying to stay close to a budget, maybe to see if you really like this hobby. This is a very fun lens to use, and it's going to give you the ability to get a wide range of focal lengths. So those are all the things that I really like about this lens. So maybe what is not so great about it? Well, the first thing that I'll mention is that I've noticed when shooting video and the image stabilizer is on, which I leave on pretty much all the time, I've noticed that the image stabilizer jumps. So you'll be following something in frame, shooting video, and the stabilizer will cause the frame to jump. I understand what's happening there. It's trying to balance the frame for you, and it gets to kind of an end point and it needs to jump, and it can be very annoying whenever that happens. I need to remember sometimes, if I am stabilized, to take that off and not worry about it for video, but that is kind of a negative. And I've noticed that even when shooting handheld, that happens sometimes. So that's not ideal. Another negative is f9. Yeah, f9 can be a challenge. We're wildlife photographers. We're in situations a lot of times where critters are most active whenever the light is low. And f9 is definitely going to be a challenge for that. I'd love to have a 2.8 or an f4 and have a long zoom at that length or a long fixed length. But guess what? I don't have $13,000 or $14,000. And that's why I really appreciate that Canon made this lens and made it accessible for people like you and I that don't have that extra kind of cash laying around. So for under $2,000, we get this length. We just have to sacrifice some light. And I do get it. It is a lot of light. But check out this graphic here. I love this graphic from cameralabs.com that shows us that we can gain a whole stop of light by shooting at 630 millimeters rather than 800 millimeters. And that still puts us a whole lot closer to our subject than the RF 1:5. Although at 500 millimeters with the RF 1:5, we would be gaining an extra stop of light. So you really just have to ask yourself that question. Is it more important that I'm letting more light in, or getting that range, getting that distance, getting closer to the subject in frame? You've probably seen in the images that I'm showing here on screen that I'm not afraid to bump up that ISO. And you really need to do that whenever you're using this lens. So shooting at 6400 ISO with this lens and then throwing it into Topaz or using Lightroom Classic's denoise feature, you're going to be able to get rid of the noise that is generated, but you're also giving yourself the ability to crop in maybe a little bit more after you've already shot a closer image. So it's really a fun lens to use, knowing what the capabilities are and kind of retraining our minds now to shoot at these higher ISO levels. Another negative is that it is weather resistant and not weatherproof like an L lens would be. This is not an L lens. As much as it looks and feels like an L lens, it is not an L lens. And I will say that I've been in elements where I have been a little bit nervous about using it, and I'll put it away and get out a different lens. The instance that I remember the most was this winter photographing short-eared owls in the snow. The snow would be coming down, and I was getting nervous zooming in and out, having that snow sitting on the barrel of the lens as it creeps in and out of the body of the lens. I did get nervous that that moisture was going to cause some damage. It didn't, and I was always kind of wiping things off. But if you were working in a heavy downpour, I wouldn't take this lens out. To me, it's not worth risking some of the problems that could result. A big challenge in the field using this lens that's 200 to 800 millimeters, an incredible focal distance that it covers, is the throw that the lens has. So trying to get it from 200 to 800 or vice versa, it doesn't happen in one turn. It does take a little bit of time. And you know, if you're looking into your lens and you're turning it and then turning it again, maybe your subject, you're losing it in the frame a little bit. Maybe you're losing time because it takes more time to do this. So I would see that as a negative, but that's why I maybe try not to be at the extreme length, either at the low end or the high end. Maybe it's good to be somewhere in the middle and then make adjustments whenever the action does slow down. One final negative, and I just kind of file it under it is what it is. The lens was too big to keep on the body with my old camera bag. So I had to buy a new camera bag, but it's okay. I absolutely love this bag. It's a Gura Gear. It's the Kaboko 2.0, 30 liter. It's absolutely amazing, and I'll leave a link for it in the video description. All in all, this is just a fantastic lens to use. I've really enjoyed my time out in the field with it. It's so much fun to be able to get so close to the subjects without interrupting their behavior. You know, and that's the thing too, because we're able to be so far away, we're going to not be interrupting that behavior. We're going to have longer time with the critters. We're going to see more natural behavior happening. So I would highly recommend this if you don't own it yet. If you're new to photography, this is really a fantastic way to get started. You're going to have really the best of both worlds at your fingertips, an extremely long zoom and the ability to pull back, as I mentioned, and capture that full environment. I've made a lot of videos where I've used this lens out in the field, so be sure to check this video out over here where you can see the lens kind of more in action, and I'll see you there.